Mr. Sprinkel, good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. All right, as I understand it, and you and I have met before, is that true?
Yes,
All right. You are a deputy district attorney with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office.
I am.
You have been so employed, as you've indicated in your testimony, for since 2013. Does that sound about right?
2011.
2011. Okay. One of the things that you talked about initially, I think your testimony, perhaps when you were here last, was your specific role in regards to reviewing case files.
Yes.
Recall that. I heard you say, and you tell me if this is accurate, that sometimes when a file comes to you from an investigating agency, that it is not always, in your words, complete.
Yes.
And you testified, did you not, that it would be your job or your duty, your responsibility to do some additional work. That may not be the word you use. You may have said investigation. I'm not sure.
I understand. Yes. If it's not complete insofar as we don't believe that it would be appropriate to present it to a grand jury and subsequently a trial. Right.
Because of course, your interest as an assistant district attorney is to make sure that cases are properly put before the court or put before a jury. True?
Correct.
And in fact, when you, one of your duties as a district attorney is to make sure that there is sufficient evidence or appropriate evidence presented in a case that goes before a court, goes before a jury, correct?
Yes.
All right. Because it is important to make sure that people who need to be prosecuted are prosecuted, right?
Yes.
It is important to make sure that people who should not be prosecuted are not prosecuted.
That's correct.
You do not want, and your duty, I believe, encompasses this, you do not want to have someone charged or arrested or their freedom taken for an offense that they did not commit. True?
Your Honor, as the answer in.
Overruled. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay. And so I want to talk to you about a number of things, but I want to start by asking if I'm correct that when you came into this case in 2016, the case had already been with the detectives Gaither, Dennis, and Thorpe, right?
That's correct. Those were the detectives that primarily were the ones that I knew of that had been working on it, yes.
Work had already been done on the case as far as you knew?
Yes.
In fact, people had already been arrested in this case?
Yes.
And I'm talking specifically about Donovan Thomas's murder.
That's right.
All right. Because that's what you were looking at.
That's right.
And so you knew by the time that you came into this that there were 4 people who were sitting in the Fulton County Jail who had been charged by the detectives whose name we've just referenced with the murder of Donovan Thomas.
That's correct.
And which
Kenneth
4?
Copeland, Shannon Stillwell. Who else?
Antonio Sledge and Demiki and Garlington.
All right. Those people, as far as you knew when you picked up this file, had already been investigated by the detectives, true?
That's true.
And by the way, you had worked previously. I mean, you knew who detectives Gaither, Dennis, and Thorpe were. You know who they were.
Yeah, I knew who they were, yes.
You'd worked with them previously.
I had.
Right. And so you came into this with people arrested, believing that the work had been done properly to have these 4 folks in the Fulton County Jail, right?
Well, that was my hope.
Right, right. That turned out not to be the case, right?
Correct.
In fact, tell me if this is right. I think you testified to this, that there was the interview of this gentleman named Spencer Wright in, what was it, October the 19th of 2015?
That sounds right, yes.
All right. And that
2015. Did you say 2015?
2015.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And that interview was done by Detective Thorpe, correct?
Correct.
And the next day, the 20th, is when Detective Thorpe went in front of a judge and got an arrest warrant for the 4 people whose names we've just mentioned.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Right. And those 4 people were arrested and put in jail as a result of the investigative work that had been done by those detectives whose names we've just referenced.
Well, when you say those detectives, I would not, Detectives Gaither and Dennis, I wouldn't group them into that. It was Detective Thorpe that was the affiant on the arrest warrants for Mr. Sledge, Mr. Garlington, Mr. Copeland, and Mr. Jackson, a.k.a. Mr. Stillwell.
Right. So one person swore out the warrant. That was Detective Thorpe, right?
That's correct.
But you're certainly aware that over the course of the investigation from January of 2015 to the time that Thorpe went and took out that arrest warrant in October of 2015, that he had communication and collaboration with Detectives Dennis and Detective Gaither. You know that, right?
Well, he sat in on interviews with them, some of these interviews that we've discussed or I discussed on direct. So, yeah, and they work for the same agency. So, yes, I would say yes.
Right, and looking at your, what you've termed, maybe we termed, the Sprinkel report, right, where you kind of reviewed this case, looking at that report, you know that there were times when, for example, Thorpe would go and consult with either Gaither or Dennis about a particular individual that they were investigating. True?
I don't. It would seem like it would seem that would be the common sense thing that would have happened. And I'm not trying to be difficult, but I don't know what kind of I don't know what kind of conversations Detective Thorpe had with Detective Gaither and or Detective Dennis.
They were.
Sorry guys, I don't know why StreamYard just did that. I was literally typing to put something in the chat and then it just froze. So I'm back. Sorry about that. I think it probably cut out like a question or two, so I'm gonna go back a question. But Adams is going bananas with his play call here. It's my opinion, right? I think that Sprinkle wants to go above and beyond to be a class A+ student. He wants to be cooperative. He wants to be helpful. He wants to be in the right. And Keith Adams is playing right into that. And one thing that I really like that Keith Adams did, and I hope it wasn't frozen on your guys, and for that part, hopefully we're rewinding and catching it. But when Sprinkle, in his desire to be extremely specific, said, well, Thorpe was the affiant, the jury might misinterpret that to mean Thorpe was the only one that had any involvement at all in the search warrant. And I'm going to have to refresh the StreamYard link. Maybe it was StreamYard that Law and Crime that messed me up. We are about 2:33.
Was taken.
Let's go back. We are about here. But one thing that I like, and I don't know if you guys caught it, but right when he said Thorpe was the only affiant, the jury could take that to mean Thorpe, who we heard was squirrel brain and played around, the jury could think, oh, well, maybe they charged the wrong people because it was Thorpe calling all the shots. However, that was really just Sprinkle trying to be precise. Technically, only one person's name is on the affidavit for the search warrant and the arrest warrant, and it happened to be Thorpe's, but the affidavit included things that were the production, the work product of all of the APD officers. And Keith Adams clarified that to the jury. That's really important because we don't want the excuse to be, well, we had the wrong 4 people because it was Squirrel Brain in charge of everything. Keith said, no, it was everybody's collective efforts. And now those same people are all collectively saying it's somebody else 5 years later. So great, great work by Keith Adams here. Sorry about whatever just happened with my StreamYard freezing.
There was one interview that was over 9 hours long. So, and there were multiple interviews with him. So it was over 9 hours. It suffices to say.
Right. So getting back to my, the question I asked a little while ago, you certainly had information that these 3 detectives, Thorpe may have been the one who took out the warrant, right?
Yes.
But these 3 detectives were in contact, in communication with each other in regards to Donovan Thomas's murder. You knew that.
Yes.
Right. And ultimately, what happened is that they arrested the wrong people, didn't they?
As to
Vagueness and the word they.
the same.
Okay. Ultimately, the Detective Thorpe with the Atlanta Police Department, after consulting or talking to Gaither and Dennis, took out for these 4 individuals, charged the wrong people with the murder of Donovan Thomas, correct?
To that question, Your Honor.
Sustain.
When you, one of the things that you did when you first began to kind of look into what had happened in this matter is that you realized, and you said this in your report, if I'm wrong, maybe I'm reading it wrong, you correct me, okay?
Okay.
But one of the things that you said in your report is that it seemed as though the arrest of these individuals, and by the way, these folks were arrested. I mean, they weren't just like suspected, they were actually put in jail, right?
We got that.
Okay.
Go ahead and ask your question.
All right, get in there. You said that this was almost entirely based on the statement of Mrs. Spencer Wright.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. And it turned out that Detective Thorpe, or whoever else was involved, did a ridiculously poor job of vetting or looking into Spencer Wright's statement. Isn't that true?
Well, there was surveillance video that Mr. Wright said he was a specific place, and there was video that would have showed whether or not he was there. That apparently was not inspected very closely prior to obtaining arrest warrants.
Right. Well, in terms of not investigated fully, Spencer Wright, Thorpe spoke to Spencer Wright on the 19th of October, right?
Yes.
Now, when you came into the case, one of the first things that you thought to do was to really examine the statement from Mr. Wright. Is that true?
Yes.
And you did so?
I did.
And you spoke to him?
I did.
One of the second or third things that you did, right, just using some common sense, was to go and look for video around the location where you thought Spencer Wright would have been, right?
That's right.
And you did that.
I did.
And you were able to find it.
I was.
And it was pretty easy.
It was.
Detective Thorpe, before arresting folks based on your words, almost entirely the statement of Spencer Wright, never took the time to even go look for video where Spencer Wright supposedly would have been, did he?
Well, that I don't know. You would have to ask Detective Thorpe that.
Well, did you? Did you ask Detective Thorpe that?
Oh. I'm sure I did.
Let me guess. The answer was that he had not done it, right?
I remember the answer he gave at the preliminary hearing about the video.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. When you come into the case in 2016, was there any video that had been procured from that location
Which,
by Detective Thorpe? Where the bus stop, where Spencer Wright
Yes.
would have been?
Yes.
Was there?
Yes, there was a video camera, and in the viewable area of that camera was the bus stop where Mr. Wright said that he was standing at the time of the homicide.
Right. Had anyone gotten that video?
Yes.
Who did?
It was the specific investigator was probably either Frederick Page or Jason Teague, but ultimately it wound up in the possession of Detective Thorpe.
Okay. Before these four individuals were arrested or after?
Before.
Okay. And so even having the videotape that you looked at and that you made a determination was pivotal in the arrest or in the case, even having that information, Detective Thorpe still went ahead and swore out the warrant for the wrong people on October the 20th?
That's right.
So after you realized that Thorpe had not done what should have been done in the case, right? You went a little bit further and you got some recorded phone calls of Spencer Wright, true?
I did.
And you were able to listen to those calls. And I'm not asking you what was said, but the contents of those calls, you were able to listen to those, right?
I did.
And those were also instrumental in convincing you that here we are in 2016, that the wrong decision had been made by the detective, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, would I be correct, sir, that you then, realizing as an assistant district attorney, charged with the duties that we've just talked about, used all deliberate speed at that point and said, you know what, detectives messed it up, got the wrong people in jail, we got to get them out of jail right now?
Yeah, well, I disclosed all of this to the defense attorneys at the time. I can't remember if well, Antonio Sledge got out of jail pretty quick because that case was just thrown out at the preliminary hearing. The other ones, I would have to review the record. I know that, well, I'll just leave it at if they were in jail, I don't know if it was just on this or other things. I just don't know. Okay.
Did you do, what do you call it down here in Fulton? Is it an NPGJ, not presented to the grand jury when you dismiss a case?
Yeah, it's a form. It's I don't know what I don't remember what it basically says. We're not presenting the case. The evidence is not sufficient. We're not presenting. That is, the DA's office is not presenting the case to the grand jury at this time.
Okay. And so when you realized what had happened in this case, when did you file such a form?
Well, so that would have been the elected DA at the time, Paul Howard, that would have authorized or maybe have even signed that himself. But Kenneth Copeland. Well, no, I believe that was done with Kenneth Copeland.
When?
I don't recall the date.
Does 2017 sound about right?
Yes,
okay.
It does. I don't I don't recall the exact date, but that does sound about right. Mr. Sledge, his was thrown out like January 2016, I believe, whenever the preliminary hearing was. And as far as Garlington, and Mr. Jackson, aka Mr. Stillwell's, was never thrown out. And as for Mr. Garlington, I don't know. I don't know if there was an MPGJ filed on him or not. There should have been.
Okay. As you're reviewing the evidence in the case, and we've just talked about Spencer writing that information, you talked earlier and you asked questions about this other video that you looked for. Remember that?
I did.
And you remember a little while ago you asked questions about video from the Texaco gas station.
Yes.
Okay. You remember, and I think you testified that there was this video that you received, or that you were able to review, of vehicles at the Texaco gas station not far from the barbershop around the time that the incident occurred, right?
That's correct.
You talked earlier, if I'm right, about this Pontiac Bonneville, right?
That's correct.
You talked about other vehicles that you saw, correct?
Correct.
You talked about individuals that you saw there at that gas station, right?
That's correct.
You were asked by the prosecutor whether you saw Kenneth Copeland on any of those videos. Remember that question?
I do remember it.
Your answer was no,
That's right.
because you did not see Kenneth Copeland at that gas station, that Texaco, sometime around the time that the murder occurred, right?
That's correct.
Right. You weren't asked, so I'm going to ask you whether you saw Jeffrey Williams on that video at the Texaco at around the time that the murder occurred. Did
Okay.
you?
No, I didn't see Jeffrey Williams on there, no.
And you looked at the entirety of the video, right?
I did.
I think I heard you say that I don't know if you said all of them. A lot of videos, you went back and you looked at them multiple times, right? Mm-hmm. So January 10th, 2015, somewhere between, let's say, 6-something and 6:50 and 7:30, the time that you looked at the Texaco, Jeffrey Williams is not on any video getting out of any car, getting into any car at the Texaco down the street from the barbershop. True?
That's true.
Okay.
My bad, I was muted. I was saying, in short, use the same logic that the state's trying to use and flip it against them. You know, if Kenneth Copeland isn't on those videos, so the state's trying to insinuate that all this speculation, the defense thinks that Kenneth Copeland is actually a third-party culprit here. Well, he was initially charged on accident. Us thinking it was him initially, that was a mistake, an honest mistake, no big deal. He's not on the video, couldn't have been him. A video from a gas station, not where the shooting occurred, but somewhat near where the shooting occurred. And then Keith Adams says, well, if that's your logic, well, did you see Jeffrey Williams on that videotape? Because the state's trying to say Jeffrey Williams caused this. So great way to flip that logic on its head. And yeah, sorry, I'm like messing up a StreamYard today. Like I'm having my own disaster crisis over here. Thank you so much to Classy Beats. Tag teaming in here with Amy here. There's a shout out to the beautiful Amy E at the end here. And she is beautiful and she deserves all the shout outs. Love Amy E, one of the sweetest people you can come across on YouTube. And Classy, you're okay too. Classy says, this is my ticket to the Chef Adams barbecue because he's cooking Miss Love. And I think it's only gotten better since you sent this. Y'all get those likes up and show Kat some love. Shout out to the amazing Amy E. Thank you guys so much both for your support of this channel and giving us a place to hang out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for great music. Also, big shout out here to Steven Satchel's gifting another membership, just picking them away out there, turning them green. Shannon Alexander became a member, another person I thought has been green all along, but, you know, no better day than today to become a KNW Slime member. Glad to have you, Shannon. And then Peter Ortiz coming in and dropping 20, which is incredible. You guys make sure you say thank you to Peter Ortiz. And it gives you an excuse here. You can use that exploding emoji because that's Peter's favorite. So Peter, thank you so much for your support. You support a ton of channels too. I'm so gracious to you and love the support that I see you give other channels as well. So thank you for being here and thank you for all that you do for the YouTube world. And where is Angie? It's like Angie, we have like snipers here between Steven and Angie today. They're just picking people out of the audience that are going to become gang members, sliming them green. Thank you so much, Angie. Ike says, Miss Love, why did you call this witness Twinkle? Knowing that this ticking time bomb line of questioning was on the horizon, Braderhoff Award nominee. Now, Ike, did you get to watch the pre-trial with Sprinkel? There has been a trial run of this exact line of questioning. Love could have prepared. Love could have done better on her direct, knowing exactly what was going to come. She didn't. She didn't. And the problem with a witness like Sprinkle is, unlike when Gaither's on the stand and it switches to cross-examination and Gaither gets extremely hostile, Sprinkle wants to be cooperative. He's not stumbling over his words because he is just trying not to have the answer. He's stumbling because he quite literally doesn't know the answer. And when you've built this witness up as being your excuse to explain why we brought this indictment so late against different people than the people that were initially charged, with some of the different parties now no longer being indicted at all, but suddenly having immunity deals, your know-it-all witness is suddenly stumbling over their words when they're asked key questions. It's not a good look. And I really think the jury might have the impression that he wants to be the teacher's pet. He wants to be cooperative. So it's going to sting the state's case even harder when he cannot answer an important question. He doesn't know the answer to who was actually where on important dates surrounding important incidents. Just crazy. So you've got it right on the head, Ike. And the context there, guys, is Sprinkle delivered like an hour and a half of testimony already, direct and cross, during pretrial. Love should have been prepared. She just can't adjust. She can't make the strategy adjustment. Kins MW says, I love the stern approach. Adams, make them sweat. I love a Keith Adams cross-examination. I'm so glad you guys are getting to see a bit more of what Keith Adams is capable of. He really is, or is it? He is cooking. He's catering today. And Sassy Experience, good to see ya. Says, tagging in, make sure y'all watch the lunch break. Okay, great. Thank you for your ping on that, because I think you've given me a heads up on that before. We're not just going to blast through it. We've got to look. They're probably going to have to argue stuff over lunch. So we'll make sure we don't skip the important parts. That's very helpful. Thank you so much. AK says, Sprinkle, the guy they make Lifetime movies about. Oh, no. And kind of, similar comparison, but different. Esquire says, he reminds me of the car expert in My Cousin Vinny. Wants to know the answers, but good to see you, Esquire. Ike says, let's be clear. He subjectively looked at Instagram photos and got warrants based on that. If so, these people have no limitations. Yep, so really was looking at social media. And then, remember, he's the guy that put out the warrants to get the search warrants, or the wiretaps, so they could listen into, like, Demekian Garlington's phone. Some of those calls that we're still fighting admissibility on. He's the guy that put that in. So that's one of the reasons he's important. And then Chloe, we'll get back into it. Chloe says, don't pretend to not know Lil Wayne, right? Like, come on. You stand in the mirror shirtless in boxers and work boots trying to learn the words to truffle butter. No, I don't want that image. Chloe, you are hilarious, but sometimes it gives me like a visceral reaction. I don't want to picture that. Oh boy. So let's continue. Thank you so much for your support and for being so grateful in the chat, guys. Whenever someone gifts memberships, you guys are always right on it, showing appreciation. Love you guys so much. Capital C chat. Let's see what else Keith Adams is about to serve up.
I heard you say that one of the things that interested you when you looked at that video, the text codes, that you saw an infinity. You remember saying that?
Yes.
Okay. And you became interested in doing some additional research or investigation on that Infinity vehicle. You remember that?
I do, but actually, I think that if we're talking about when I decided to do certain things, I may have actually conducted additional research on the Infinity before it caught my attention on the Texaco footage. I can't remember the exact, but just to be precise. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was probably around that time, but yeah. But
one of the things that we know for a fact is that you determined that you wanted to get more information about this rental vehicle, right?
Yes, that's right.
And you did. You and/or your investigator made contact with the folks at Hertz, right?
It started with me when I sent the subpoena to Hertz, and then after that, after receiving some documents from a woman named Carolyn Fry, then I asked David White to travel to the location where the vehicle was rented and speak with the staff at that location.
Okay. So let me ask you some very specific questions about any information that you gleaned about that rental vehicle. You testified earlier that one of the things you were able to determine is that the vehicle was rented in the name of Jeffrey Williams. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Right. You were not able to determine who it was that actually rented the vehicle, just that it was in the name of Jeffrey Williams. Isn't that right?
It was in the name of Jeffrey Williams, his driver's license number, and a signature. There's a signature as well.
Now, tell me the date that that vehicle was rented.
From what I remember, January 7th, 2015.
All right, so that would have been 3 days before January 10th of 2015, correct?
That's right.
All right. Now, tell me, if you can, who had possession of that vehicle on January the 8th of 2010?
2015?
What did I say, 2010? 2015, yes.
Yes. I don't know.
You don't know who had possession of that vehicle on January the 9th of 2015, do you?
I do not know.
And you certainly don't know who had possession of the vehicle, no personal knowledge of who had possession of that vehicle on January the 10th, 2015.
If we're talking about actual possession, the
Actual
person,
possession.
then no, I do not know.
Okay. You never strike that. By the time you came into this case, that rental vehicle, I mean, it had been at this point, what, a year since the incident? We're talking January 2016 is when you're in this case?
Yes, I obtained the records from Hertz in 2016. It would have been over a year. It would have been around April of 2016 when I obtained the records from Hertz.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about some of the things you did not do. Okay?
Okay.
You referenced earlier there were a lot of numbers being phone numbers being kind of, I don't want to say thrown at you, but put in front of you in terms of, well, you were able to get information on this phone number and that phone number, the frequency of communication. You remember those questions?
I do.
And you did in fact have the ability to procure phone records by way of either subpoena or search warrant or court order.
That's correct.
Okay. You were able to get a lot of different phone numbers on people that you thought or individuals you thought might have been of some interest in the case. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. You also, when you request those phone records, you have the ability to request cell site or cell tower information, correct?
That's correct.
Now, and I know you're not an expert, but you are familiar with utilizing, maybe with an expert, cell site and cell tower information to try and make a determination as to where someone might have, or where a phone might have been at a particular time. True?
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with plotting cell phone records. I'm not like an FBI CAS team member or anything like that, but I can hold my own.
Right. So having listened to Kenneth Copeland's statements, and you did that, right? Mm-hmm. Having listened to his statements, one of the things that you would have wanted to do, I presume, I'm asking, is try and determine whether or not you could corroborate certain information in his statement. Is that about right?
That's about right.
All right. He gave, like we said, at least one 9-hour statement, and he gave a lot of statements. There was a lot to listen to from Kenneth Copeland.
Yes.
And he gave information that you would have used to follow up in your investigation.
That's correct.
Right. The name Demekian Garlington came up in your investigation. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. There was this reference, in listening to Kenneth Copeland's statements, there was this reference to a conversation, phone calls that he would have had with Garlington, right?
That's correct.
And it would have been some interest to you to figure out whether or not what Kenneth Copeland was saying, not just about that, but everything was corroboratable, was true.
Yes.
Right? Or whether Kenneth Copeland was lying to y'all, lying to the detectives, not y'all, because he had already been interviewed, right?
Right, that's right.
Because you considered him to be a pivotal witness in the case.
Yes.
Right? And some of the things that he said you would have considered to be pivotal things that you want to follow up on, right?
Yes.
And if you have a witness, just like Spencer Wright, for example, if you have a witness who you think has pivotal information, but that witness is proven to be a liar, that's something that you want to know in regards to the investigation, true?
That's true.
And one of the things you could have done in regards to Kenneth Copeland and any statements he said, phone calls he said he may have had with someone named Demekian Garlington, is you could have gotten Garlington's phone records to determine whether or not those communications took place, right?
That is correct.
And also where Mr. Garlington was to see whether that comports with what Kenneth Copeland said, right?
That is correct.
Now, you got Kenneth Copeland's information, his phone information, right?
I did.
You got his location, so you knew, or at least the phone, where that phone was at certain times on the night of January 10th, 2015, right?
Well, to be specific, what you see with tower data is the tower and the side of the tower that the phone utilized. That can be a pretty large area. In a city with a lot of cell phone towers everywhere, you get a little bit of a better idea, but I just want to make sure that we're clear that it's not the exact location of the phone.
Sure, not the exact, we can't pinpoint within feet or maybe not even within a block, but it was important enough to you to get that information on Kenneth Copeland on the phone that you thought was being used by Kenneth Copeland, right?
Yes.
Now, you did reach out to get information on Garlington's phone, or what you thought was Garlington's phone, right?
There was a number that I thought may have been Garlington's number.
Sure.
And I believe I referenced that in my report. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was maybe a Sprint number, or maybe I can't remember exactly. It wasn't in his name. I was never, the short answer to your question is I was never able to get tower data for Demeke and Garlington.
Well, it's not that you weren't able to get tower data. You requested the data for that phone number and specifically requested it without the tower usage logs. Isn't that right?
Yes. So there was a number that was in Kenneth Copeland's records, came back, I want to say to a female. Now, and I remember, and this is, I'm thinking, and unless there's something that can refresh my recollection, from what I remember, I couldn't prove. It's one thing to get call logs are very easy to get. You don't need probable cause for those, but to get location data, you need probable cause. And I remember, from what I recall, I didn't think that I had probable cause to get tower location data for this number. Usually, I'll try to do something like. There's a number of things, like if I find a jail call to the number and I hear the voice that picks up, I say, oh, well, that corroborates that number is in fact that person's number. Or if somebody cites it on their Instagram page and says, call me on this number, that's going to get me to probable cause that that's that number. But if it's just that it's in temporal proximity, and I think there was another issue with the retention period of the number. All I know is I didn't think I had probable cause. I never got probable cause to get the.
Never got probable cause. That's kind of significant if you ask me. We don't have probable cause to get records for a person of interest. And yet somehow in 2024, we are knee-deep in a RICO indictment, a trial for at least 6 of the enjoined co-defendants, with more waiting their trial. But we didn't even have enough to get probable cause there.
The power records.
Let's work backwards a little bit, right? Let's start with this. When you sent out the request for the records that you thought was a number to Demeke and Garlington,
Yes.
you requested those records specifically without tower usage logs, right?
I did.
Okay. Now, you had previously requested records for what you thought was Kenneth Copeland's phone number with the tower usage logs, right?
I don't know that it was me that did that. It may have been investigator or Detective Dennis that did that.
Right. But one thing that you knew, I mean, you honed in on the fact that there was supposedly this call between Kenneth Copeland and Demeke and Garlington, and they were supposed to be at a specific place on the night of January 10, 2015. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Right. And so you had listened to Kenneth Copeland's statements, and you knew from Copeland's statements that he made reference to Wade Garlington, who was an important witness to you, right?
It was.
Right. You knew that Copeland had made reference in his hours of statement about this conversation and the location of Garlington, who was an important witness. You knew that.
That's right.
Right? And so you still didn't think that that was enough for you to go ahead and try to verify whether Kenneth Copeland was lying through his teeth or not by getting Garlington's tower usage logs.
I will say one other thing.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
So Short said, let's approach because, look at Love's face. What are you guys thinking so far? And we could fast forward through a bit of this, but let me know what you're thinking. I think Sprinkel is just in a tough spot of his own doing. It's his personality. Last week on Direct, he was bolstering his own work. He was trying to say he was basically the cleanup person for the mistakes APD made in their investigation. And that's why Steele was like, well, can I move to admit an exoneration from something he prosecuted? Which clearly, if someone was exonerated, his prosecution there was a mistake there. A serious enough mistake to warrant an exoneration of someone that was convicted. So Sprinkel tried to bolster his own work, make it seem like he was the fixer-upper for APD's work. And then here we're getting layer and layer and layer of things that, so you had a video and it showed you something else, but yet you still chose to go this direction instead. Or you didn't think you had enough probable cause, and you never had enough probable cause to try to obtain cell site information. Like, I don't know if we want to call it a slow cook or a slow weave, but Keith Adams is doing some work here. I think it's great stuff. And then also this, Mike Bree said Sprinkel said he could recognize voices on the wiretaps. I mean, I'm interested in seeing if we get something specific there. If we play some of these and Sprinkle's the one on the stand and he gets to be asked, like, whose voice is this? How can you tell when it's not really clear who it is? I'd be interested in seeing some objections in the moment there. Okay, and that was really quick there.
All right, Mrs. Sprinkle, so I'll just ask the question just very simply. Bottom line is, I am correct when I say that you requested the information on Mr. Garlington's phone, but you requested those without the tower usage logs. Is that true?
That's right.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you something about a picture that we looked at a little bit earlier. All right. Remember the picture that the state put up? I think it was states 510 and DS 44. You have those in front of you?
I do.
Do you mind if I step up and take a quick look at them? May I, Judge? Yeah. All right, ma'am, Ms. Sprinkle.
There you go. No problem.
Ike, I agree. And I don't know if you guys could see it. Love is just sitting here tapping her leg with a pen.
I wasn't clear earlier,
She was
so I
like-
want to see if I can clear this up. You've been to what's been termed the Sky House, right?
That's correct.
As in, you have been there to the building, right?
That's correct.
Have you been inside to the individual units in there?
I have not.
So you've not stood inside of the Sky House in front of a window and looked out the window to observe what the skyline that you can see or what the view is you can see from a particular window, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so those pictures that you saw earlier, you've seen the pictures before, right?
I have.
But you have not stood in the vantage point of the person in that picture to be able to say, this is someone looking out the window of the Sky House.
That's right. I have not.
Now, although the bulk of the work that you did was in regards to the January 10, 2015 shooting of Donovan Thomas. Am I correct about that?
That is correct.
Okay. You were asked a couple of questions about some other matters. Specifically, you were asked some questions about this Lil Wayne tour bus shooting business. Is that right?
That's right.
Right. Would I be correct in saying that what you know about that is information that you received from Detective Raisi and any other detectives or investigators involved in the case?
Yes, Detective RAISSI, David Racy. He, last I heard, was with the ATF.
Okay. You spoke to him and you got some information from him, correct?
I did.
You were not intimately involved in any investigation of that portion at all. True?
That's true.
You were asked a question earlier though about a phone number. The prosecutor asked you about a 770-881-1440 phone number. Remember that?
I do.
Okay. That is a phone number that you looked at while you were looking at this whole Lil Wayne tour bus business. True?
I don't know if that, I don't know if that number caught my attention because of the Lil Wayne tour bus
Okay.
incident.
Do you know who Clifford Harris is?
Yes.
T.I.?
Yes.
Okay. That's his number, ain't it?
Yes, that's what I found. That I
Okay.
concluded, yes.
And if I heard you correctly, there's a phone call to that number that may have been picked up, may not have been picked up, but ultimately doesn't have any significance to you in regards to this investigation. True?
I mean, just that it was an incoming call at 7:30 p.m. on January 10th, 2015.
That's it.
That's right.
Okay. Oh, you know what? Let me jump back a little bit, if you don't mind, to the whole Sky House business. One of the things you asked was whether or not there is controlled access at the Sky House. You remember that question?
I do.
Your answer ultimately was yes, right?
That's correct.
But the truth is, you referenced that there was what you believe to be a call box at that location.
That's right. There was a call box, a number that I identified. I just can't recall. There's obviously going to be controlled access.
Why do you say obviously?
Well, I mean, to get into the individual units, and there was a call box for which I identified a number. I just don't recall where the controlled access point was. Like, do you need one to get into the parking garage? Do you need one to get into the building? I just don't remember. From my personally going out there, I just don't remember.
Sure, and that's really what I want you to testify to, your personal knowledge. Mm-hmm. The truth is, you don't have any recollection as to whether or not there's any particular way to get in a gate, or whether there is a gate that you have to get buzzed in or anything like that. You don't know that, do you?
That I don't remember. I don't know if it's like the building, the door to the lobby was open, and then from there, or you had to get buzzed up. I just don't remember.
Okay, so the truth is, you know, in talking about the Sky House and access to the Sky House, you're really not in a position to tell this jury that, yes, there's a controlled access and there's a certain way to get in there. You just don't know.
Yeah, I just don't remember. Like I said, I'm sure I know that there was some sort of control. I just don't know if it started at like the lobby door or in the parking garage. I just don't know.
Okay. Okay. Do you recall, you had an opportunity to listen to statements by various individuals in this case. Now I'm going to hone in on Quindarius Zachary. You had a chance to listen to his statement?
I did.
Okay. And you're aware that Detective Dennis had a conversation with Quindarius Zachary, is that right?
He and I both, well, there were a couple of them. During one of them, he and I both did.
You sat in, right, on one, but that's not what I'm getting at. I'm asking whether or not you had an opportunity to listen to any statements between Mr. Zachary and Dennis prior to your involvement in the case.
Yes.
Okay. Judge, may I have one moment, please?
The two of them. Look at Sprinkel looking at them. Oh, he just looked away. All right, get it together, Keith. Garlington is still a defendant, so you know you can't make a defendant. You can't force a defendant to testify. So they need to get these wiretap calls with Garlington in somehow. So one of the ways that they're going to lay the foundation so they can be admissible is through Sprinkel. So the state had to call Sprinkel for numerous reasons, which is kind of weird to think about. They have to call an ADA to the stand as a witness, but here we are.
All right, Mr. Sprinkel. Give a second, I have a chance to gather some more stuff. All right. I want to ask you about phone calls.
Okay.
And specifically about phone records that you were able to examine. Now, you obtained records for numbers that you believe belong to Jeffrey Williams. Is that right? And I'm talking now, I want to hone in, right? I'm speaking specifically in January of 2015.
That's right.
Okay. You obtained numbers that you believe belong to Jeffrey Williams.
Yes.
Okay. You obviously, as we've discussed before, obtained numbers that you believe belong to Kenneth Copeland.
Yes. Well, Kenneth Copeland, I believe that was somebody else, but when you say you obtain, I'm speaking, what I'm saying is I reviewed records. So either I or a DA's office investigator obtained them or some law enforcement investigator obtained them, or if I obtained them via subpoena, et cetera.
Sure. And I don't, and listen, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And when I'm saying you obtained, I'll tailor it. You had a chance to review.
Yes.
So, okay. You had a chance to review phone records that you believe belong to, as we talked about before, Mr. Demekian Garlington. Is that right?
There were records for Demekian Garlington. Yes, but they didn't cover the night of the murder. But yes, there was also, and I think we talked about this already, a number that I found in Mr. Copeland's phone records that I believed was Demekian Garlington's, but I never got to probable cause.
So here's my question, right? Focusing now on Jeffrey Williams, the number you believe belonged to Jeffrey Williams.
There were a few.
And Kenneth Copeland, right?
Okay.
There are, and I'm talking now about the night of the murder, January 10, 2015. There are 0 calls. I mean, 0 as in nothing, none, zilch. 0 calls between Kenneth Copeland and Jeffrey Williams. Isn't that true?
That sounds correct to me. There's obviously, the phone records can be voluminous. So I'm going off of, my memory from I feel like I would have remembered something like that. I'm also refreshing my recollection by looking at my report from the excerpts that I placed in the report. And and specifically, I included Kenneth Copeland's phone records, the relevant portion from the night of the murder. And matter of fact, I'm looking at it right now. Yes, there are no phone calls to Jeffrey Williams.
Okay. What about phone calls between Demetrius Garlington and Jeffrey Williams?
No, I don't believe so either. No,
0 phone calls.
that's right.
Okay. Wiretaps. Did you have the ability to seek any wiretaps in this case?
No, we certainly had the ability to seek it, but we never did.
Okay, and I'm talking specifically, and you said we, but I'm speaking specifically now about Jeffrey Williams. No wiretap of any phone. You never sought any wiretap of Jeffrey Williams' phone, did you?
No, we never did.
Okay. I want to, so we talked about what you've done in regards to the Donovan Thomas matter. We've talked about this tour bus shooting thing that you didn't really have anything to do with. I do want to jump back and ask you a question on a name that you mentioned earlier, Sammy Davis.
Okay,
Okay, Sammy Davis was someone that you spoke to.
he was.
Okay, that was someone who was supposedly at the location or somewhere close to the location on the when the incident occurred. I'm talking about January 10, 2015, correct?
That is correct.
And you had a conversation with him in 2016,
I believe it was 2017.
2017. Okay. Without saying what that person said, actually, strike that. One moment, please, Judge. You mentioned earlier, Mr. Sprinkel, Twitter records that you were able to, I guess it's called X now, but Twitter records you were able to retrieve in regards to individuals in this case, or that you looked at, true?
That is correct.
Did I hear you say that you reviewed Jeffrey Williams's Twitter records and Twitter history?
I was aware that Mr. Williams had a Twitter page. I don't recall how closely I examined his Twitter page, though.
Okay. So you would not be in a position to tell this jury that there's anything about his Twitter page that you reviewed in regards to January 10th of 2015?
Well, if I did, it's not something that made an imprint on me such that I remember it. So I would say no, there was nothing.
Right, and because you are charged with reviewing and making determinations about what you think is important or pivotal in the case, if there was something there, that would certainly stick out in your mind.
Yes,
And it does not.
that's right.
All right. If I may have one moment, Judge, I may be a few more moments, please.
All right, he comes back up pretty quickly. But very interesting. Not enough to get probable cause for more than one different thing right now. Not enough to look at Jeffrey Williams. Well, and actually he said they never sought it. They didn't even try. We've got the laptop at a 90-degree angle here. I'm going to start
Well,
using
that's something
devices
that
at a 90-degree
I
angle.
wanted to jump back to. Remember we talked a little while ago about Mr. Copeland giving a statement about a conversation between he and Garlington the night of the incident?
Yes.
Okay. You recall from listening to Copeland's statement that he references that the night of the incident, he's supposedly at McDonald's and he makes a phone call to Garlington, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And you recall from his statement that Copeland also says that he ended up in a vehicle with Garlington and McMullen. You remember that?
I do.
Okay. Now, looking back again at judging the veracity of the statements people give to you, specifically now Copeland, you were able to determine that at the time when Copeland says that he is in a car with Garlington, that Garlington's phone, or the phone you think is Garlington's phone, is actually calling Copeland's phone at that time. You remember that?
Oops.
No, I'm not sure. You must be referencing Mr. Copeland's cell phone call data records, and there's a phone call at a specific time that somehow occurs at a time when I don't know. Yeah, is that what you're talking about?
That is, let me see if I can break it down anymore. Copeland gives a statement saying that he spoke to Garlington on the night of the incident, right?
Yes.
Copeland gives a statement saying that at some point he's in a vehicle with Mr. Garlington and Mr. Demise McMullen. True?
That's correct.
All right. Looking at the phone records, at the time when Copeland says he is in a car with McMullen and Garlington, you actually see phone calls between Garlington's number and Copeland's number when they're supposedly in a car with each other, right?
Well, so first of all, what number are we talking? Would you like me to say which number I believe may have been Demiki and Garlington's?
Sure. Go ahead and tell me what number you're talking about.
It was 404-621-0102. That would have been pretty much the only number during that immediate aftermath of the homicide with which he was in contact. And there were routed calls. Well, I won't get into that, but I had some what I believe to be limited tower location data for that 404-621-0102. But the calls, there was an inbound call where that Naisha, 404-621-0102 rather, 621-0102 called Kenneth Copeland at 7:51 p.m. and 36 seconds on January 10th, 2015.
Right.
Now, you'll see, now again, if in fact that was Mr. Garlington's number, there were some routed calls that were but a routed call is not necessarily a communication between the two numbers. It could be an attempted call that wasn't completed. So, but you'd have to ask Mr. Copeland, about those phone calls and where he was, and if Mr. Garlington was actually in the car with him, or he was inside, the convenience store or the McDonald's or wherever it was they said they were. I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, okay. Let me ask you if you know this. All right. Again, we agree that according to Copeland, he, McMullen, and Garlington are in a car together, right?
That's what Mr. Copeland said. Yes.
Okay. And there is a phone call. Let's not talk about Copeland. Let's talk about Garlington and McMullen. Mm-hmm. There is a phone call between Garlington's phone, that's the one that you've referenced, the 0102, right? That's right. What you believe is Garlington's phone, right?
Is that yes?
And there is a phone call that connects between Garlington and McMullen's phone at the time when they're supposedly in the car together, according to Copeland.
That, again, I don't know where they. I mean, I know that they were in close temporal proximity, or spatial proximity, I should say, at the time of these, according to Mr. Copeland. As to whether they were actually in the immediate confined space and they hadn't parted ways temporarily, and one is calling the other, I don't know. You would have to again. I don't know if they were within 3 feet of each other at the time of these phone calls. All I know is that they were within 3 feet. They were very close to each other during this time period, at least temporarily. And where they were, if they were walking around a parking lot, I just don't know.
Safe to say that verifying anything that Mr. Copeland says is true proved to be a Herculean task for you, huh?
Well, I just tried to find things that were obviously inconsistent. Like, for example, with Spencer Wright, where I just looked at the video and I saw nobody was at the bus stop. I said, well, that's obviously a pretty big inconsistency in a statement. That's all I was trying to do with Kenneth Copeland. And I didn't, as far as the phone records are concerned, I didn't see anything that was wildly inconsistent or that completely contradicted him at all.
Something you said earlier when we were talking about the phones, you said that you're not an expert, but you have pretty significant experience with kind of looking at cell tower locations and if not plotting, at least trying to make a determination, reading those records
Yes.
to determine where a particular phone may have been at a particular time, right?
That's right.
And it's fair to say, again, without asking you for an engineering or technological type answer, that those records that you look at that give you the distance or location of a phone is not an exact science. It's within miles, right?
It could, I mean, potentially, it could be in a populated area with a lot of cell phone towers. It'd be very odd to use a tower that's miles away from you. That may be something more in a rural area that you might see. But one thing I will say is no, it's not an exact science.
Yeah, and
particularly the records at issue here was just, from what I remember, it's just tower usage and sides of the tower.
Right.
Meaning you're using this tower and you're using the antenna pointing this way. That's a big area.
And of course, we're talking about the city of Atlanta, which is very populous, and we're also talking about things like a call bouncing off of one tower or being routed to another tower because of the traffic, the cell tower, the cell traffic at that time. And the bottom line is that you could be talking, if you're trying to pinpoint where one phone is at a particular time, you could be a block off, a mile off. It all depends.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Okay. Right. I think that's all I have.
All right, we're gonna break.